Picture with me, you're in a car. It's 12 years ago, West Michigan. The driver, me. Don't freak out. Just a little. The person sitting next to me, the most beautiful woman in the world, I ended up marrying her. We're driving from Grand Rapids to Leslie. Leslie, Michigan is a tiny town that no one's ever heard of. It's south of Lansing, right in the middle of the state. It's where I grew up from high school on. My parents live there still. We're driving from Grand Rapids, where I went to college, a route I've taken dozens, probably hundreds of times, but this time is different. This is the first time she's going to see where I grew up. So we're driving, we're talking like we do, we're on our way on the highway on 96, we go across, come by Lansing to get on the 127 exit, and I see Okemos, which is on the other side of Lansing. Oh, I think we missed our exit. So we turn around and go back, and then we see ourselves on the wrong side of the highway once again. Oh, I think we missed our exit. She's really beautiful. So we turn around and we go back again. Hey, isn't this Okemos again? We missed our exit, so we turn around one last time, and this time we have a vow of silence. And I keep my eyes on the road, and we get our exit. Now, you may not know it, but I failed in wayfinding. Wayfinding is a word that simply means the way in which you find your way. Wayfinding has to do with the signs you see up around you. On the highway, wayfinding would be those exit signs, which I completely missed. Now, a little hint about those exit signs. You see them on the highway, big and green, say where you're going, and then it says what exit you're getting off at. If the little number, a little sign for the number is on the right sign of the exit sign, chances are your off-ramp is going to be on the right. If the number is on the left side, it's going to be on the left. It's a subliminal and intentional design choice. That is wayfinding. It's making navigation easy through potentially complex systems. The best wayfinding is the one that you don't even notice. But then there's airports. Airports are a potentially chaotic environment, and wayfinding is designed to make the chaos a little more calm. Airports are actually utilizing some of the most wayfinding techniques. When you walk in, the ticket counters will be angled. So when you go to the ticket counter, it naturally directs you to the next direction you should go in, towards security. The tile on the floor will often be patterned in a certain way to keep traffic moving a certain direction. You don't even notice it, but it's all around you. The best wayfinding are ones where the signs aren't even necessary because you can just see the airplane, your destination that you're going towards. Now, wayfinding in airports is often funded by the stores in the airport, because they know that a stressed out traveler will spend a lot less money than one who is calm and collected. Which means when you get through security, suddenly the route forces you to go around this way and then that way. And as I go this way, I can't help but see all the lovely whiskeys and wines in the duty-free shop. And over here, all the perfumes and everything else. And then over here, the smells of cinnamon coming in, luring me their way. This is an intentional design choice created so that you will end up in a certain place, in a certain frame of mind. Now, ironically, it's a consumeristically driven enterprise at the airport. Could it be the airport is becoming the new shopping center? There is an implicit connection in our world today between wayfinding and consumerism. Whether it's the billboards you see, the ads that now just pop up on your phone as you walk by the store, whatever it is, intuitively directing you to go from bank account to cash register. How did I end up with this? I have 5 of them. No, I'm not saying that you need to become a militant anti-capitalist, but I am saying look around and be aware of what the environment is conditioning you to do. We live in a world that wants you to spend your money. Do not be conformed by the consumeristic wayfinding age, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Now let's talk a bit more about money. Specifically, the evolution from a local currency to a central currency. Now, I am not an economist, nor am I an economic historian, but I read books by those people, which is where I learned things like this. In the late Middle Ages, society began to evolve from a barter society to a local currency. Now, what I mean by that, the barter society would be, I got chickens, I need some shoes, which means I need to take my chickens to a shoemaker who wants them. Otherwise, I'm just going to be wearing my chickens. But the move to a local currency really revolved around grain, agriculture. The grain would be harvested and then stored in some sort of a grain storage silo. Thank you. I'm from Iowa. Silo. The silo was the original bank. This is where the farmers would take their grain and they would receive a small foil printed ticket that said how much they had left there. And this ticket could be pulled off little parts, and rather than having to haul your grain everywhere to the chicken person or the shoe person or whoever it is, you could simply take this small little piece of paper-like object, pull off a corner of it to represent a certain amount that you had deposited, and that had value. Sounds a lot like currency we're used to. But there's a big difference, because this method, this local currency, the longer you hoarded it, the less valuable it would become. It's only valuable when it is used for the community. The grain is going to spoil. Now, the feudal lords in the late middle century saw this emerging, and they realized it threatened their place of comfort and privilege and power. So they came up with an idea called the central currency, or the inception of capitalism as we know it. This is when, rather than the grain standard, we had the gold standard. This is when the rulers would stamp their face on a coin or a piece of paper and say that was the most valuable thing, because everyone likes looking at their face in the mirror and saying, that's valuable. Rather than grain, now we had gold. Now the feudal lords could hoard the currency. In a world where it's grain, you have to get rid of it. You have to give it away. In a world where it's gold or some other form of printed currency, you have interest. You need some, well, I'll loan it to you. Now you have debts. This is the inception of capitalism. This saw the rise of poverty, and this is where, in many ways, we see one of the first needs for a living wage. Do not be conformed by the currency-hoarding, interest-building, debt-inducing age, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. Okay, let's talk about zombies. There is a current outbreak in our world, and it is zombies. We had one here this morning. I think she's been cured. You can turn on the TV and see The Walking Dead. You can go to the game store and buy The Last of Us. You can pull out your iPhone and play Plants vs. Zombies. You can go to the library or rent it on iTunes and watch Warm Bodies or read it, World War Z. Zombies are all around us. Are you freaked out? Now, you might be thinking I'm going to take the leap to say we live in a zombified culture that's obsessed with capitalism and consumerism. But you've already made that connection, so I don't need to. I want to connect zombies to living wages. You see, a zombie is this thing that's not fully alive. It is trapped in a system where it's never fully satisfied. The zombie will just keep on going no matter what's in its way, trying to reach this end goal of the luxurious brain, but never being fully satisfied, never coming fully to the life it's reaching for. Now, let's have some numbers so we can make sure we have the living wage context in front of us appropriately. I'm going to say a set of them, and I need you to repeat them back. 7, 8, 12. 24, 25, 40. 7. $7.25 is the federal minimum wage. $7.25 an hour. 8. $8 is the New York minimum wage. All right, and it's scheduled to go up a little bit more at the end of the year. A little bit more, very little bit more. $12.75. This is the living wage for one adult. One adult who lives by her or himself, the living wage, according to MIT, who has a whole calculator. You can find livingwage.mit.edu. $12.75, the living wage for one adult. Minimum wage is $8 in our city. Living wage for one adult, $12.75. $24.69 is the living wage for one adult and one child. One adult and one child, $24.69, while the minimum wage is $8. Now the number 25, that is a percentage. 25% of the people earning minimum wage in our country are in their mid-30s. They're not 18-year-olds in high school with an after-school job. They are adults. So a 35-year-old with a child making minimum wage is falling about $16 short every hour. Lastly, 40. 40 years and older. 1/3 of the people making minimum wage are 40 years or older. Are they saving for retirement? They're working through their retirement, making a minimum wage. Not a living wage, a minimum wage. This lack of a living wage leads to a zombification in our society. And by that I mean we are perpetuating people who are seeking to be fully alive, but there is a system that consistently tells them, nope, you're never going to make it. $8 is always going to be less than $13 or $24, no matter how you do the math. These are people who are reaching for a living wage. They're not just reaching for a living wage, they're reaching to wage a living. The need for a living wage is not just about money, it's about life. Do not be conformed by the zombified, consumeristic, $8 is always less than 12 and 24 world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. Paul wrote this to the Romans. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this age, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Now, this letter to the Romans, written by a guy named Paul, mid-first century. He had never met these people. He's writing them a nice long letter. They'd heard of Paul. He kind of was a little bit famous even before the internet. I want us to understand a bit more of where the context this is being written to, who it's being written to, and then why Paul chose some of these words, which I think might help us see the age in which we live a little differently as well. Now, this mid-first century was a largely agrarian society. You know, this is still way before that late Middle Ages when the local currency began. This is an agrarian society that was also a debt society because the land was owned by the wealthy elite, rented to the lower class farmers at prices they could never pay off. So they're working the land that belongs to someone else, never digging themselves out of the hole that they're constantly planting seeds in. It's also a context where the Roman Empire was ruling the world as they knew it at least. The Roman Empire was the leading ruling power, filled with the wealthiest elite, Caesar at the center, who claimed himself to be a god or the son of God. It's to this context that Paul is writing, and he's writing to people in Rome, the center of that Roman Empire that ran this agrarian debt society. He's writing to the empire. Now, he uses some interesting words. He says, do not be conformed, but be transformed. Now, before we do some English grammar, let's make sure we all understand the Greek, which I know you read on your spare time. When you go home and read this in Greek, you're going to look at that word and go, that doesn't look like the word transformed, because Greek letters look kind of like, our English letters, so you can kind of fake your way through it. That's what I did, at least. You can look at it and go, that looks like the word metamorphosis, because it is. The root for the word transformed here is metamorphosis. When one thing becomes something else entirely. It's not just changing the rules of the system, it's changing the system. It's the caterpillar becoming the butterfly. It's a world in which zombies can become human again. It's a world in which minimum wage becomes a living wage. Paul uses this word transformed. And then he goes on to say, transformed by the renewing of your mind. Now you might think, what is this? Some ivory tower elite academic just telling me to think differently? No. In the Greco-Roman culture, the mind was the center of the worldview system. Now you may have heard the Shema, which is in the book of Deuteronomy. It's a Hebrew prayer. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your strength. When Jesus quotes it in the New Testament, we see an extra word added in. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. The Greek culture imposed this understanding of the mind being all powerful. And so Paul is saying, be transformed by the very core of your worldview. Be transformed by the thing that is most central, the thing that guides and directs everything. Could it be in our world that's be transformed by your checkbook? Be transformed. Now, let's go to the English grammar. Be conformed. Don't be conformed. Be transformed. School's starting soon, so this is a good lesson. Those are passive words. Be conformed, be transformed. It's an action happening to you. We live in a world where you will take some form. The question is, what form will it be? Will you be conformed by the age around you? Or will you be transformed, butterfly to caterpillar, zombie to something alive, minimum wage to living wage? Will you be transformed by the renewing of your mind, which is a work that can only happen by God? This is why we've been talking about justice all summer, because these passive words, be transformed, lead to an active lifestyle. When I am transformed by God, then I am able to go out and transform the world around me. This is why at the beginning of August, Elisa preached about Freedom Summer that happened 50 years ago. Thousands of people who gathered to be transformed and to transform the world around them. A legacy that continues today through freedom schools and other work. This is why the following week, Adrian talked about the prison industrial complex and the need for this ongoing transformation in systems and powers that be that constantly perpetuate certain points of view and an undergirding an environment where certain people have rights and other people just seem to be left. We say, no, we will transform the system. This is why last week we stood with our hands up, a sign of surrender, a posture of prayer, to be transformed so that we can transform the world around us. This is why today we're talking about the need for a living wage, and this is why we will keep talking about the need for justice, because God will keep transforming us so that we might transform this world. Do not be conformed to the injustice of the world and the zombification, but be transformed by the love and grace and peace and justice of God. The household of God. In God's household, everyone has enough. In God's household, there is room for all of us. In God's household, the wages are always livable. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind, of our minds, our bodies, and all the world. Amen.